Hello, everybody. Most
Hi.
warm
Hello.
welcome to you all.
Hello.
And thank you so
Hello.
much, Tom, for inviting me to do this. And what I'm going to do is speak about some artists. Tom gave me the theme. He said, would you speak about art at the threshold? And what I want to just say is what I understand by the word threshold. So, threshold is actually a door in and it's a door out. And in terms of our soul and our lives, we often have to pass through the threshold when we have to give up something we know and move towards something we don't know. The threshold is often quite a turbulent time where the old overcoat of our lives is no longer fitting us and we have to find a new way of being. So we are constantly going through the threshold in our lives. I think it's very healthy to go through the threshold. It's very worrying if we don't, because if we try and hold ourselves safe in one place, we don't give ourselves the opportunity, although we might feel frightened. If we can be courageous and go there, it will actually take us towards something beautiful and more inspiring. So the threshold it's quite a serious experience, but it's also a very, very joyful one. So I thought about who I wanted to speak about, and I think we're just going to start with Paula Modersohn Becker. You can do the slide, Tom. Oops. So I just want to introduce Paula Modersohn Becker to you. So Paula Modersohn Becker was actually, I think she was 8 years older than Virginia Woolf. And she was from an incredibly normal, conventional middle-class family. And as a young girl, it was very, very clear that her future was going to be either that she would marry, and if she didn't marry, she'd be a governess. So the only education she was invited to have was to be a little bit of music, a little bit of languages, a little bit of watercolor, so that she could make her living if she didn't marry. It was not expected of her to do anything else. And Paula Modersohn Becker died when she was 32 years old. And what I find absolutely amazing about her, and which I wish I could instill a bit more into my life, is that when she was very, very young, and she realized that her father's attitude to her was this sort of prison of expectation, she made a decision. She said, well, I actually really want to be an artist. There's no way I can talk about this with this lot. So I'm going to keep my secret self guarded inside myself, and I'm going to find ways to get myself into the place I want to be. And so she said, she would say to her dad, oh, could I have a little bit of art, a few art lessons? And he made it possible for her to have art lessons in the city. And then she discovered that near where she lived, outside Bremen, there was this art colony. And she began to visit the art colony. And while she was there, she met a man called Otto Modersohn. And he was married and he had a child. And he and her, they secretly fell in love, but there was no question. And it was arranged that she and a lot of people from the art colony were to go and visit Paris. Everything was very sort of safe and sound, and nothing dangerous about letting her go with a group of people to Paris, nothing dangerous about her going to visit the art colony. Everything was safe and sound. And while she was in Paris, Otto's wife died, and he rushed back to be with his little girl. There you see her. And not long after that, Paula and Otto I suppose, a suitable time, were able to acknowledge that they were in love, and everybody supported it because they thought, well, Otto needs somebody to look after his daughter. So her mother and father thought it was all right that she was going to live in an art colony because he was a successful painter and she had a role to look after this baby, this child. And nobody knew that what she thought was, I'm going to get into that art colony and I am going to become a good artist. And the thing that's very interesting about her, I mean, I don't know if it's interesting, it's beautiful and astounding and magical, is that she said about herself, I know I will not live very long, but is a festival any less marvelous for being short? If I am allowed to paint 2 good pictures, to know love, then I will put flowers in my hair and I will die in peace. So she knew that as a young girl. And this very special thing about her biography, that she sensed in some way she didn't have much time and she really went for it. So she went and lived with Otto, and she describes the incredible loneliness and unhappiness of this marriage. She says, you know, it's an incredible thing when you get married. To be lonely with someone else is the worst kind of loneliness. She asked Otto for painting lessons, which he gave her. He gave them to her in a very sort of, you know, this was a little hobby. And as the time went on, it became very clear to her that he had nothing more to teach her. And we just go to the next picture. And while she was there in the artist colony, she became friends with this woman who's called Clara Westhoff. This is a painting by Paula Modersohn-Becker of Clara Westhoff. And the thing that's very, very special about this painting is that she's painted her in white. She's holding this rose, which is the kind of symbol of some deep, great meaning. And she's painted very dramatically and simply. And Clara Westhoff had been learning to become a sculptor in Paris with Rodin. So she had actually been allowed to go and learn her craft from a great, great man. And she told Paula all about that. And she had fallen in love with the poet Rainer Maria Rilke. Rainer Maria Rilke was the secretary of Rodin. And he invited Clara and Paula to come and visit him. And she had to ask her husband to let her go. I mean, she wasn't going to take the baby. She wasn't going to take him. She was going to Paris because she needed to find out if she could learn more about art. So she went to Paris more than once. She was, she got in the most awful trouble from her mother, who said, you know, what are you doing? You must stay there and look after Otto's child. This isn't right. And she describes this moment where she lays her head into her mother's lap, from whence she came, she says. And she says to her mother, I have this curly thing inside. And I know that to do something about it and to find out who I am and to become something is not selfish. It is a matter of following the Holy Spirit. And she says, please forgive me, but I have to go. So she goes with Clara to Paris several times. You should just go on, Tom. And when she went to Paris, this is painted in 1906, I think, this painting. So Paula went to Paris more than once. When she was in Paris, she really realized that she had to get away from Otto. She felt that she was being stifled, the dutiful expectations, the fact that his painting was not, it didn't have enough to teach and offer her. And there she was in Paris. She was going to these, she was a woman, so she had to go to certain kinds of classes. I don't think they were allowed to draw from the life model, but she was meeting art lessons, she was meeting art, she was meeting people. She was spending hours and hours in the Louvre looking at the Egyptian mummies and the grave paintings and all the different art in Paris, and spending time with Rilke and Clara, who had got married by then. And she was just intoxicated from what she was learning. And this is a very, very important painting. So I'm going to tell you about each artist, but I'm only going to use maybe 2 or 3 paintings each time to just describe these breakthrough moments of leaving one world and going into another. So Paula goes to Paris, and she goes into her little room and her bedsit, and she disrobes herself. She places a garment around her loins. She has amber around her neck. She described how her paintings were full of runes, that these things that she used, like the amber or the loincloth or the different things that she had around her in the paintings, they were secrets. They were the stories that she was telling. And this amber is falling in her heart chakra. And amber is pure warmth. So she's warming her heart chakra. She's painted herself as if she's expecting a child, which she isn't. And this is the first time in history a woman has painted herself naked, not to be a god or a goddess or a concubine or a wife, but to be a person giving birth to herself. So it's a most amazing, amazing thing. And it's just so beautiful and very, very special for all of us to take on, that our thoughts about our lives and the things we're going to do with our lives and the things that come up in our lives in these moments of change or transformation, if we were to pay them attention and nurture them, they would tell us the stories of what we want to be. And there is Paula Modersohn-Becker. She's discovering what she wants to be is herself. We just go on to the next. A couple of people are just joining. You better tell her how, Tom.
Hold on.
You good? Have the people come. Okay, so Paula Modersohn-Becker discovers who she is, who she wants to be. This being in Paris means she really develops her work. And meanwhile, people are trying to help her and Otto reconnect with each other. And this woman is called Lee Hoetager. I might have pronounced that wrong. And Lee's husband went to Otto, and he said to Otto, you know that Paula's dowry was her gift as an artist. And you as a husband, you have accepted the dowry and you've accepted Paula, and you've got to really support her in being an artist. This is Paula's painting her beautiful friend. You notice how her painting has by then become completely realized and radiant. The exquisite color, the simplicity of it. You can see that she's painting at a time where Van Gogh and Gauguin are the great artists of the time in Paris. She's got these flowers there, which are, I think they could be a form of hollyhock. The hollyhock is always something to do with opiates, with dreaming, with going off into a reverie. The beautiful dress, the wonderful amber around the neck, the amber in the hair, the looking away into the distance. So she's really painting this woman as in a sort of very inward way. And Otto is very moved by this request to support Paula, and they agree to come back together. So Paula Modersohn-Becker goes back to Worpswede in peace. They go back together in peace. She's going to be allowed to paint. She's going to be supported. She's not going to have to think she's driving everyone mad all the time. So she goes back to Worpswede. You should go on, Tom. And the thing about Paula Modersohn-Becker is that she must have had a very beautiful being, because she managed to get the people there. This is a well-known sort of medicine woman, a person who people went to for herbs. And she's taken this woman. If you think about Van Gogh's early potato, the potato pickers that he painted, when he first paints, he paints in quite a sort of a very dark palette, and everything is quite, I mean, people would call it crude, but it wasn't crude. It was sort of authentic and real and gestural. But Paula Modersohn-Becker has taken this turning to the ordinary people, and she has elevated this woman. She is one of the people in the village who is a medicine woman, who is a healer, who is a midwife, and she's put her there in the painting as the most important part of the painting. She's dressed in her best clothes, probably. She's holding a foxglove. Behind her are poppies, and there behind her is that big, strange shaped thing, which is something that they have in Germany. They're sort of big glass balls that people put in gardens to stop, to stop the birds. So she's painted this woman, and she's got her looking off into the distance, looking off into the place of wisdom. And this is one of the great threshold moments of the time, of her time. She's living in a time where Europe is being industrialized, people are being taken off the land, and it's the beginning of the women's question. It's the beginning of psychology. It's the beginning of the social question. And when you pay attention to the ordinary people like that, when you make a painting of the local ordinary country people, and you elevate them into this kind of almost like a sort of nature god, like a wonderful, honorable, honored woman, you're really sort of, you're turning the whole of the way we think about the world on its head. Because before the Impressionists, paintings were about famous people or rich people or gods or goddesses or Greek heroes. Ordinary people were not the subject of art. And strangely and unaccountably, the Impressionists turned to the world. They're so disappointed in their time, which they found corrupt and bankrupt, and they turned to the world of ordinary people and they flood it with light, and they're saying, and now the hero and heroine of the world is the ordinary person, and they're on the stage and they're in the spotlight of this painting because their story is a story of significance, even if they're not a famous person. So she does that out of herself, and according to diaries and memories of her, she often managed that these people would undress for her. She was able to draw them without clothes. So she learned life drawing from them. She wasn't allowed to use the life model in Paris because of being a woman. And they loved her. She loved them. She made these beautiful paintings. And so here she is in Worpswede, going down every day to her studio, making this work. And then, go on, Tom. So I just want to say something about this painting, because there's something very, very special about the last paintings that people paint. This was in her studio after she died. And it's very, I find it so poetic and amazing that very often, I mean, just recently I've been painting in my studio, and I don't normally do this, but my painting is so golden yellow. And I was looking at this enormous yellow painting and thinking, this is very weird. I mean, why am I painting this painting? I realized that I was just filled with the autumn leaves, that they have been particularly amazing. And I went into the studio, I didn't decide to paint them, I just mixed some colors I began to use, and the yellow was in my soul, and out it came. And Paula Modersohn-Becker paints this painting, which is the autumn flowers. So it's the end of the summer. Everything has been cut and everything is dying. It's all dying. These are all the late autumn flowers. I think it's called sunflowers and mallows. And I think mallows might be what we call zinnias. I'm not sure. Anyway, she paints this painting. And at the time that she's painting now, these last months, she has discovered that she's expecting a baby. And she describes how the weather, the heat, is very oppressive. She's expecting this baby, but she's carrying on working. She's very, very pleased that she's expecting a baby. She wants to have a baby. She wants to have a meaningful relationship with Otto. And just before her baby is born, she gathers together the flowers and paints this. And if we go over to the next picture, Tom. And this is the great, great painting that was left behind after she died. And if you look at this painting, it's long and narrow, as if it was a grave painting. She has been looking at the grave paintings in the Louvre, so she's influenced by that, but she's also decided to paint herself like that. She's not expecting a baby. She's painting herself in that long, narrow rectangle. She's holding a camellia, which, you know, you can see her fingers and the camellia are painted very roughly. They're not painted in detail. Once again, she has the amber around her throat, but it's around the chakra of her voice chakra. Her voice has been warmed. She's found her voice. And if you look at her, she is looking somewhere else. She is looking into the realm beyond the grave. She has a kind of numinance, that blue behind her, that radiant, shining blue, and the simple composition, but the sort of powerful feeling of it being otherworldly. And I want to just say that Paula Modersohn-Becker delivered her baby safely. Everybody was very thrilled. They were absolutely so thrilled that her baby was safely delivered. And everybody wrote and were rejoicing. And a few days after the baby was born, she got up and dressed. She put flowers in her hair and she went into the sitting room and she died. She died of an embolism. Unexpectedly and suddenly she died. And she said, "Is a festival any less if it is short? If I have painted some great pictures, if I have known love," she wanted to have a child, "then I will die peacefully." And she did. And what we hear is that Rilke and Clara said about her, they said that when somebody has led a very deep and searching life, you feel as if it's your responsibility to carry on with their great task. That Paula Modersohn-Becker's task was not art, but of life itself. And Rainer Maria Rilke and Otto, they go down to this studio. They haven't ever been there. She's just going down there, beavering away, making, and they find sort of masterpiece, mistress piece after, you know, great works of art, hundreds of drawings, hundreds of great paintings, well, many great, I think they said 400 great works. And they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe it. And Rilke said about her, I'm sorry if I get a bit weepy, but it's the weeping of joy. So he says about her, she was remote from any fame. She was remote from any fame. She was absolutely not interested in fame. She drew herself in like a red flag on a grey morning, and she wanted nothing but long hours of work. And really marvelous, really seeing her and absolutely fantastic. And of course, she wasn't really recognized until much later. I mean, now she's really, really honored and seen as a great, great painter. But when I've been to Bremen and read about, you know, the reviews of her work, they were just absolutely ghastly. They just wrote her off as this complete, crude, pathetic, useless, not worthy of recognition. And look at this, how could you think that? So what I just want to say about Paula Modersohn-Becker and the women's question is that she had this relationship with Clara, who was an artist, and Clara was in love with Rilke, who was a poet and who was working with Rodin because he was Rodin's secretary. And while he was living with Rodin in Paris, he wrote a novel, and I think I'm going to pronounce the name wrong, but I think it is Malta Laureate's Brigger. Anyway, you can check. It's his only novel. And in this novel, he describes the agony of searching for his life. And he has met Paula Modersohn-Becker and Clara, and he's actually got a view about men and women. He's written in the letters to the young poet and in his novel Malta Laureate Brigger, he's written about how women are the ones who understand about love. He says about men that they are careless and cast off love and leave it torn and dismembered and forgotten in an old box of toys, and that men must become neophytes and learn the labor of love from women. And he says women know about love because for them it is never a feckless thing, because it can take them down below the surface of life, because they can die when they have children. And we as men must learn the labor of love from the women to whom we must become neophytes. And he really experienced that, especially with Paula. And he described how he had this incredible feeling of learning from young girls who die, who stand on the threshold between two worlds and teach you the meaning of life. And in the letter to the young poet, he wrote about how that everything was being changed, and the relationship between men and women was being completely changed at the hand of women who were teaching men how to love. And he said that, so this is the thing about change, that there's a way of being, and now everything is turned upside down, and the women are seeking to become themselves. They become stripped of the outer manifestations of the things they were taught to be, and in great sort of pain and labor they find out who they are. And then this changes the love experience, which stops being between a man and a woman, but of two individuals who stand beside each other, back to back, and they are bordered by this mutual respect and patience and infinite understanding of each other. They are neither men nor women, they are human. And I think this is a very amazing thing, because in my life, when I was young, we heard about feminism, and feminism was very important in my life because it was to do with having really meaningful relationships. But there's a wonderful woman in America. Oh, Tom, I've forgotten her name. No, I'll remember in a minute. Sorry, I can't believe it. Anyway, this Gloria Steinem. So Gloria Steinem is asked about men and women, and she says, are women better than men? This is always the question that you have if you want to care about feminism. And she says, no, men and women are not, men are not better than women. Women are just more able to be vulnerable. And just recently, a couple of years ago, there was the anniversary of the great feminist writer who wrote, I can't believe I'm losing these words. She wrote The Female Eunuch, Germaine Greer. And everybody thinks of Germaine Greer as a sort of radical, ranting feminist. And she actually, in this interview about her book, she said, I don't want men and women to be equal. I don't think anybody should have to go down a mine. I think I want men and women to be allowed to unfold their potential together, to live in a way where what is important is not how much they earn and status, but enough to live on, to be in community where they can all help each other with each other's children and lives. And that what is needed, she says, men have a terrible life because they're expected to go home and bring home the bacon. They often have to do something they hate. And women are sort of trapped at home alone with a baby and not expressing themselves. She says this is not what she meant by feminism, that women should go and be like men, but men and women should be allowed to be who they really are, to make community together, to support each other, and to have less stuff and less money, and to have much more art in their lives. So in a way, this is the next incarnation of what was going on with the people in Borgsbede when they were trying to live this new kind of life. Should go on. Yes. Do you want to go on, Hef? Thank you. So the next person I'm going to talk about is the great and incomparable Wassily Kandinsky. And when people talk about Kandinsky, I'm just going to mention something about the work of Rudolf Steiner. I don't know if there are people in the audience who don't know anything about Rudolf Steiner. I'll try and speak about it in such a way that it's completely accessible. But Rudolf Steiner talks about living in rhythms. And one of the things he says is that epochs have as a regent a particular archangel, and that this archangel can have hold their loving arms around a particular epoch. And in 1879, according to Rudolf Steiner, the archangel Michael became the regent of of Europe, of our time, really. And the archangel Michael's quality is, when Rudolf Steiner talks about what does it mean to be Michaelic, he says a Michaelic person is a person who wants to bring a great thing onto the earth, or a good thing onto the earth, or to build something meaningful on the earth, and they will fail, and they will say, it wasn't the right moment, I will try again. And a Michaelic person may fail, but they will never, ever give up. So darling Wassily Kandinsky was a highly educated Russian. He was an academic. He was just about to become a professor when he came across the haystacks of Monet. He was very, very musical, and he was noticing that music was becoming very, very radical and exciting and experimental. And he stood in front of these haystacks, and at first he was incredibly annoyed because he couldn't tell what they were. And then the fact that he couldn't tell what they were became very inspiring for him, because he experienced that as music was becoming more and more brave and abstract, so now maybe painting could as well. And so he made a decision to give up his job as a professor, and he decided to be a painter. And he went to Munich, and he went to his lessons, and he thought this is an absolute waste of time, and he started his own school. And he met there a lovely, lovely woman called Gabriela Munter, who was an orphan but had an inheritance. So she went and lived with him, which was not acceptable to anyone, but she did that because she was financially able to. And they went and lived in a place called Murnau, just outside Munich. And you can go there. If you haven't go there, you're so lucky, because it's just fantastic where they went to live. It's just exactly like it was when they were there. And they and a group of people began to paint. Now, the thing that's really interesting is that they were all whizzing around in the countryside, painting from nature, like the Impressionists did, and Gabriela Munter, the partner of Kandinsky, talks about this long, agonizing struggle, and suddenly making this breakthrough. And Kandinsky said that he came in one day from painting, and he looked over at against the wall of the sitting room. There was a glowing, saturated square of color, and he thought, "Oh my God, what is that?" And then he realized it was his painting upside down. And he knew then that to paint in a naturalistic way was going to destroy what he was trying to make with his work. So, Tom, if we could just go back to that picture. You know, I've got people, not pictures now. So, next, the picture of the painting.
Sorry, they have recordings on. Do you want me to go on?
Sorry, I want the next painting.
Yeah.
Is there a way I can talk to you better, or?
No.
Okay. So I'm just noticing my time, so I have to get a move on here. Are we here? Oh, yes. So anyway, Kandinsky then began to paint. He didn't paint naturalistic paintings anymore. He found a vocabulary and where he began to paint abstract paintings. And he and a group of people passionately worked together. And they had this amazing quality of the Michaelic age, which is that at that time in the Bremen Gallery, there was a quarrel amongst the painters because they had bought a painting by Van Gogh and there was a big to-do, and they should have only bought a German painter. And all Kandinsky and his friends said, there's no such thing as a nationality in a painter. A painter is always of the whole world, and the painter is. I'll just look on the. Shall I go on?
Yes, sorry. I took over slides from the old show.
So you've just seen a painting of Thomas. It's very difficult to talk about it if it's not there. Anyway, Kandinsky and his friends, they began to paint together. They began to work with abstract. He began to work with abstract art. And what he felt about abstraction was, he said, I'm revealing a secret with a secret. So he's talking about the inner world. He's actually talking about the forces of life, you know, in Dylan Thomas's great poem where he talks about the green fuse that pushes the grass up, you know, when you break your arm and you put it together and you wrap it up, and strangely and unaccountably it grows together. What makes it grow together? It's something that's invisible. It was that invisible force that he wanted to paint. And so he says about himself as a painter, he says that he's experiencing those forces of life behind nature, and he's commanding them with the self of himself as an artist, and he's revealing with the painting that life which lies behind life. And they made an exhibition which was called, well, they made this exhibition in Munich, and they made an almanac for it called Der Blaue Reiter. There it is. And what is so significant about it is that there is there is George and the dragon. So there's George on the horse, and he's leaping off from the world out into the cosmos, the starry, lightning-filled, glowing sun cosmos, and he's bringing the future. And they didn't call themselves the Blaue Reiter, they called this exhibition the Blaue Reiter and the almanac the Blaue Reiter, because what the Blaue Reiter said was, art is now to be completely widened. The almanac the exhibition included music, poetry, art. It included the art of the indigenous people. It included the art of the so-called mad of children, and they put it all there in this great exhibition in Munich. And the intention was, it then went around the whole of Germany, Europe, in many cities, and they had expected to do an almanac for every year with a whole different group of artists there. But tragically and awfully for the world, the First World War broke out, and Kandinsky had to go back to Russia. And all the artists as a group, they were broken up, and of course many of them had to go and be soldiers. Two of the greatest of them, Franz Marc and beloved, oh dear, I've forgotten his name. Two of the most beautiful of them died in the war under terrible circumstances, I mean in the trenches. And so this group of artists broke up. We go to the next page, Tom. So just to explain, I'm just going to show you two pictures about Kandinsky. I must get a move on. So Kandinsky was called a synesthetic. He had synesthetic. He was synesthetic. He experienced music as colors. So he's not painting a concert, but he was at a concert of Schoenberg's music with its 12 tones, this very exciting new concert, and he experienced the concert like this. He experienced it as these colors. So there is this black shape, which is the piano. The yellow, which is streaming out, was the music. For him, the music was this rich, warm yellow. And you have an indication of the figures, and the pillars have become great pillars of sound. And so he's changing the whole way that people make art. They're no longer making art about what's outside. They're making art about inner experience. We should just go on. Can you go on, Tom? This is a painting which is actually about inner searching. So you have an indication on the left of a little group of figures, and there's some figures behind them surrounded by white. And these figures on the left, he describes as being sort of a bit more lost. And between them is these many different sorts of blue and these very upright, still figures. And behind them is something like something streaming in, an experience, a moment of enlightenment and understanding. And he's trying to describe this inner experience of being a searching person. But he's not illustrating, he's painting the experience. We should just go on. Oh, I just want to say something about Kandinsky and this group of people around the Blaureiter. Nearly all of them were religious. Two of them were Russian and belonged to the Russian Orthodox Church. And Kandinsky survived the First World War, the Russian Revolution, where he tried to be an artist there, came back and became part of the Bauhaus. And the Bauhaus was this great architect school which began in Weimar with Gropius. And Gropius said about this, he said it was an architect school, but he wanted to be a community like the communities that were around the great medieval cathedrals. So it was a community of painters, every craft under the earth, the builders, the music, every single thing that could be called an art or a craft was brought together under one great a sort of community of people that would work in a way which brought together the separation between the crafts and the arts. And Kandinsky was invited to go and paint there, to teach there. And he describes how he went there and had this long conversation with somebody there who took notes. And they talked about religion. This was in 1922, after the First World War. He got back from Russia, he was in Weimar, and they talk about the war, they talk about religion, they talk about art, they talk about the future. And Kandinsky says, the church must and will renew itself through the power of the Holy Spirit. There are spiritual streams active today which point towards new ways of religious worship. And strangely and wonderfully, as he was saying that, and it was being written down, in Dornach was being celebrated the first service of the Christian community. And what I think that's about is how a time has an essence. The Christian community is a church which welcomes everyone. It has male and female priests. It's not stuck. It's very welcoming. And this was how they were about art and about life. They were very, very disciplined. They were very hardworking. They mastered their craft, but then they learned how to be spontaneous and dare to move to the future. So, and now we're just going to talk about his great friend, Kandinsky's great friend, who came with him to work in the Bauhaus. And that's the beautiful and adorable Paul Klee. So Paul Klee was actually from Switzerland, but his parents were German. He, if you go on, Tom, he was a graphic artist. His work was sort of a bit bitter and harsh, but he came to Munich to learn how to be an artist. And he was invited by two friends. August Macker was the other person who died in the war, and him. They went together to Tunis, and this is in 1914, just before the war broke out. So Paul Klee is in Tunis, and he says, in the light of Tunis, the light of the environment, the color of the environment, he makes this great statement. He says, I and color are one. I have become a painter. And you can see this is an abstract painting. There's the suggestion of palm trees, there's a suggestion of buildings and walls and a city. There's tissues of color, just tissues of color. I and color are one. I am a painter. So this is Paul Klee's great breakthrough in 1914, just as war breaks out. We should go on. The next picture. And Paul Klee is has to go into the army, and he's made to paint. What is it? Sorry. Thank you. Camouflage. He's made to paint camouflage on airplanes, so he survives the war. He's not doing anything ghastly where he gets shot at. He survives the war. At the end of the war, the First World War, was trauma over the face of the earth. Generations of people broken by being in it. Generations of people broken by losing people who are in it. Generations of people bewildered and depressed because what was it for? Deeply, deeply traumatic time. And he painted this painting called The Destroyed Place. And he describes how he stands back and he tries to look at it, look at the situation as from the eyes of an angel, with a sort of objective fervor. These colors are cold and painful. The light is light, but it's a sort of cold light. The windows are there, but they are black and empty. And he paints this experience of destroyed Europe, and at the same time he paints tiny, tiny little shoots of growth. There on the left side of the house, there's a little cross, as if something, there is a seed of something. You should just go on. Now, the thing about Michael, the thing about the threshold, and Michael is about, I try, it didn't work, I try again. These men, they created all the work around the Blue Rider. They saw it all destroyed by the war. They saw their friends die and the whole of society sort of broken up. They came back to Germany. Paul Klee and Kandinsky went and worked in the Bauhaus. And lo and behold, what new horrors! Hitler began to take power. And the Bauhaus was this incredible place where they had these great, great ideals. They had to move 3 times because of the way the public didn't like them. Nobody liked them because they were so different and original. And he is told that he has to leave Germany because he's a Jew. And he says, actually, I'm not a Jew, but even if I was, I still don't think it's right to treat people like this. But he sees the next thing that he has put his heart and soul in destroyed, and destroyed by something so demonic and dark. And he goes back to Switzerland. Paul Klee is married, and his wife is a musician, and they have a little son called Felix. And they go back to Switzerland, and to his absolute horror, he discovers he's got this terrible, terrible illness. I'm going to try and pronounce it. It's called scleroderma. It's where you have too much collagen and your muscles begin to tighten. Sometimes you can have it goes into the organs and it dries up your lungs, and in those days you simply died. And he discovers that he's going to die. I mean, it's just he has to face everything that he's ever done has been broken. He has to face death. And at first he's very, very depressed and struggles and struggles and struggles. And then he paints many pictures about struggling with death. And then he paints, this is the last picture that he painted in 1940. He said he couldn't bear to think of, not war again. It was absolutely horrific for him that there was going to be war again. So he's having this war inside him and this war in the world. And he paints this picture, and this picture is, I think it's unfinished, it's untitled. It was left on his easel. But if you look to the left-hand side, you see there's a little drawing of a man wrestling with an angel. So he wrestled with the angel of death, and he overcame the angel of death. And then beside him, there's a kind of cloth, and there's these 2 objects, the sculpture and a little pot, a little jug or something you put tea in, and they're enlivened, they're jaunty, but they're on this cloth, and on this cloth are scattered flowers as if it was a grave. And there is a sort of sun in the black of night. I have tried and tried and tried to understand what's going on in that corner, that top left-hand corner. And I feel, there's another red cloth. There's vessels. I wondered if they were grave vessels. There's a flower, there's life, there's a sort of strange object that you can't really tell what it is. But he painted this painting, according to his family, he was at peace about his death. The painting is kind of like his inner story. He's overcome the angel of death. There are the grave flowers. There is the future over in the left-hand corner, through the sun there, through the black. And this is Klee, how he came to his end. He always said about himself, I am much, much nearer to the dead. Even I feel I'm nearer to them than anything, but still not near enough. He said all his ideas came from the dead. He was the most amazing teacher. He was the one who famously said, a line is a dot which has gone for a walk. When they were in the Bauhaus, because they were trying to do this kind of community, nobody's allowed to paint easel paintings. So they were all doing it in secret. And Klee found out, and he said, oh my God, we can't say they can't do things. So everybody began to be not only things on the wall, but also easel paintings. So he was a very flexible beloved teacher, and very brave, and died in peace. And you can go to his grave in Switzerland, and there's the most amazing art gallery there, all about him. I should just move on. I'm a bit worried about the time. I've got another half hour. I can do this. So this is Alexei Yavlensky. This is another Russian. And the thing about these people are so sort of mythological. Alexei Yavlensky was brought up to be a soldier, a high up member of the Russian army, aristocratic army. And he was very religious, and he describes his experience in church with the icons. And I mean, I don't know how you feel about icons, but I totally believe in them. I really believe that when you meet an icon, that you meet, the Holy Mother of God with her starry cloak holding the emerging being of mankind. I mean, the icons are just incredible. Christ, there are all kinds of icons. But he was brought up in a church where it was part of the festival that you would walk around the church, and at each point they would take off one more cover of the icon, the gold cover, the pearl cover, the silver cover, until finally you saw the image, the holy image, and everybody fell to the ground. And for Yavlensky, when he was a soldier, he said, actually, I want to be a painter, and I want to be an icon painter. So we should go on. And he, I just want to say something about this painting, because I'm very, very interested in how a piece of art affects you before you know what somebody said they were doing, whether it communicates with you before you've read what it's doing or read their words. And when I was at art school, we were having a bit of a hard time. There's something funny about famously at that time, people said that Scottish art schools were very hard on their students, and they felt it was sort of bad for you to be encouraged or praised, because it'd make you not try hard enough. And so you had to really, really keep it together to get through the training. And one week I was sent off by myself, because the rest of the class, who were all young people of 18, they went to Amsterdam, and they were just dying to go. They weren't going to look at pictures, they were going to smoke dope and be wild. And so I said, do you mind if I stay at home and go and see lots of art galleries in Scotland, because I've only just come here. So they let me go to let me stay at home and go to galleries. And I went to see this in the Gallery of Modern Art in Edinburgh. And I remember feeling very sort of low and a bit sort of lacking in confidence about my own ability as an artist. And I came across this picture. I stood in front of this picture, and my solar plexus began to bubble, and my whole body became filled with joy. And I thought, who the hell painted that picture? What on earth were they doing? And I went and read all about Yavlensky being an icon painter, and what he said about the human face. When you want to look for God, you don't look up, you gaze into the eyes of a striving person, and their face is actually across, down the nose to the chin, across the eyes. And you look into their eyes, and there you see the eternal being of the human being. And at first he painted these very radiant, powerful pictures. And I actually experienced that they did something to me. Should just go on. Tom? So as time went on, Yavlensky, he also experienced the coming of the war. He went to live in Switzerland. He found a model with this beautiful oval face, and those radiant, very gestural paintings, they began to get more and more simplified. And you see, it's called meditation. And if you look at this painting, it's oval. It has, if you go down from from the top of the forehead down to the nose, it's a cross, one, and then you go across from left to right, the other part of the cross. And just in the middle of her eyes, there's these dots, which he called the marks of wisdom. Jawlensky actually had an anthroposophical doctor. He knew a lot about anthroposophy. There were books about a theosophy in Kandinsky's library, and strangely they were living in the same city, but they never met Steiner. And a beautiful older priest called Hans Weimann. Was he called Hans, Tom? What was Weimann's first name? Sorry, I don't mean to say Weimann. Andreas Weimann, a very artistic priest in Stuttgart. I couldn't speak a word of English and German, and he couldn't speak a word of English, and Tom would sit with us, and I'd ask him all these questions. He knew everything about art. And I asked him if they had met Steiner, and he said that there was a story that somebody took Kandinsky's pictures to Steiner, and Steiner said, "Is he clairvoyant?" And they said, well, I mean, I don't know what you would say about that. I mean, he was connected with the forces of life. And Steiner said, oh, he doesn't need anthroposophy. He understands that behind the world lies this spiritual reality. So yeah, Jawlensky paints this painting. You can see it's still very joyful. It's very tender. It's very different from the first one. It's very meditative. She's got her eyes closed. She's looking in. We should go on to the next one. Can you go on to the next one, Tom? So if you just look at that date. So Jawlensky was in Switzerland during the war. He came back and lived in Wiesbaden after the war. And he painted and painted, and he was a person who had a dealer. He got discovered, and he had a dealer in New York, so he did have a way of making his living. But he was a person who began to suffer from the most horrendous rheumatism, so that his hands were in unbearable pain. And he carried on with his theme of the human countenance, but he simplified it. I think if you look very carefully at that, you see that he's put gold leaf behind it. And then he's painted this very simple gestural painting. And once again, there's the mark of wisdom just there at the top, the closed eyes, the mouth, the nose, the red and the blue with the gold shining through the dark. And in the end, Jawlensky lived in inexorable poverty, and he only managed to live by people loving him and making collections and bringing him food. But he says about this painting, he gave it to his great friend who was a monk, and he said that I am sending you a little chip of my soul. So these are the few paintings I wanted to share with you, and what I kind of wanted to bring out was how, you know, Paul Morrison-Becker, with no help whatsoever, at a time when the whole world is changing, finds herself, she says, you have to master the everyday, and only then can you try and do something new. You can't just think, oh, I can do it. You've got to have foundations. And when Kandinsky talked about the sign of the Blue Rider, the horse and all that, and why they're called the Blue Rider, he said, the blue is the color of the spirit and the future, but also it honors the past upon which we stand, this highly spiritual color, which also owns the past and the present and the future. So there's a humility in it. And so they have this quality, these artists, of being grounded, and then out of being grounded, daring to do something so radical and new, and to be knocked down over and over again, but never ever give up. And in that sense, whether you know about Rudolf Steiner or not, I mean, I didn't know about Rudolf Steiner when I first saw these artists, and I didn't feel, oh my God, I didn't need that to understand their Michaelic quality. I noticed their resilience, their bravery, what they went through, how they struggled, how they tried. And Gabriele Munter's she kept all of the paintings that they painted at that time hidden behind a wall in her house during the war. So Gabriele Munter's house, it has this sort of fake wall, and all their paintings were kept there safely, so they didn't get taken by the Nazis, because the Nazis called this work degenerate art, and they put the degenerate art, the artists they didn't believe in the big exhibition, and people were encouraged to spit on the art, and it was burned. So she kept it safe. And at the end of the First World War, when Kandinsky, who had been living with her all that time, told her that while he had been away, he had married, and their relationship was ended, and he'd come back to get his paintings, she said, no, you've broken my heart. I gave you everything. I'm keeping the paintings. So she kept the paintings. And in 1957, the same year I was born, she gave them
to the city of Munich.
To the city of Munich, and there they all are in the most wonderful galleries. So all their emotions and struggles ended up being very good for the world. So this is what I wanted to share. And I thought I think we don't need to say anything else. I feel as though so what I just wanted to say, the artists are on the threshold of the whole of society changing, and they're on the threshold of everything in their lives changing. They remain honest about the pain, but they wrest from it a kind of meaning. And this is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you.